Beis, that would be page 296. Now this Igeres HaKedesh talks about halachas as opposed to other chelkei HaTorah, and mitzvahs maisius versus other inyanim of Yiddishkeit, like for example kavana. That's the nekudas Igeres HaKedesh. Why halachas are the most important part of Torah, and how doing mitzvahs practically are the most important part of Yiddishkeit. Okay? And the essence of the Igeres HaKedesh, the point of the Igeres HaKedesh is going to make that in halacha, which is the most basic, the lowest level of learning Torah, and in practical mitzvahs, which is the least inspired of all types of relationship with the Eibishter, you have the highest inyan. In the lowest inyan, you have the highest madrege. And in this Igeres HaKedesh, the highest madrege is called Noyam Havaya, Tzachtzachus, Tanya Go'elyan, Dalet Meis, Alman de Kisuf, and a bunch of fancy Kabbalistic names, which all amount to Ein Sof, or Sevev Kalalman, which is represented by the Mashal of Tainuk. So we're going to begin to read Chavtes, if I'm inside. It says in the pasuk, Eishes Chayil Ateres Baila, a woman of valor is the crown of her husband. And of course, the point that the Alter Rebbe wants to bring out is, what's the ruchniistic equivalent of a woman of valor? What does it mean in Pnimis Anyadim, a woman of valor? And you'll see later on that a woman of valor means Teira Shabal Peh, which is lower than Teira Shabiksav, which is called Baila, her husband. And yet, even though Teira Shabal Peh is lower than Teira Shabiksav, Eishes Chayil Ateres Baila, she becomes the crown to her husband, is a Maila and Teira Shabal Peh over Teira Shabiksav. And he explains. Isa B'Gemara Peh Gal the Megil, the Gemara says, if somebody uses the taga, the crown of Torah, for his own personal gain, chalaf, he should be killed. Now the word udishtamish b'taga chalaf is a mishnah pekiyos, but the Gemara interprets this to mean mishtamish, someone who utilizes b'mi sheshein halachas, with somebody who's learning halachas, which is called kisra shel Torah v'cholu, the crown of the Torah. So the Gemara translates ishtamish b'taga, somebody who's expert at halachas. So we see from this that nigla the Torah connects halacha with keser Torah more than any other chelik HaTorah. And then it says, Tanya Navi Yeshiva learned kol hashen halachas. Somebody who learns halachas, of course, b'kol yei muftach li v'chel is guaranteed as a chelik in el mabah. Says the Alter Rebbe Tzarech Lav, we have two questions. Lama nikra halacha b'shem taga v'kister shel Torah. Why is halacha called the crown of Torah? V'gam lama hashen halacha is dafke. Why, of all parts of Torah, dafke, if you study halachas, muftach lei v'chuli, or you guaranteed a chelik in ilam haba, v'lei shadim v'Torah. What if you learn lamdis, if you learn pilpul, if you learn chumash Rashi? Why specifically halacha has this advantage? V'chein lahav and maimed hazal. A third question is that the Gemara says, this halacha in Hilchas Talmud Torah, but the din is, everyone has a chiyuv to learn Torah every day. A man is mechoyev to learn Torah every single day. And the minimum shit is that I feel l'shana other, even if a person did not learn el pedic echad shachas, one pedic, one chapter in the morning, v'chulu, etc., and pedic echad yaris, yatsi yedei vasa, he fulfills his obligation. And it's understood from the Gemara that pedic echad shachas and pedic echad avis means halacha. So the Alter Rebbe again asks, "V'lama and yetze dechevasi, why is not one meeting his obligation of Talmud Torah, b'sha'ad divrei Torah with other parts of Torah? Why does it have to be halach?" Okay, so the bottom line is this first paragraph makes it quite clear that halachas are very important, and we want to understand why. Yes, sir. Says the Alter Rebbe Achmad Azeis. To answer this question, the Alter Rebbe asks another question. It's known, Mashakasav Arizal doesn't get Arizal. Shekol Adam Yisrael, every single Jew tzarech lav b'gilgulim, Rabbim comes in multiple gilgulim. Until Sheikayim, he will be able to fulfill Kol Tayag Mitzvah Torah, all 630 Mitzvah Torah, b'machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh. Means you have to have the kavan of each one of the mitzvahs. You have to have the dibur, which means the bracha, and the Torah of each mitzvah, and you have to do the mitzvahs b'peil. Lahashlim levushay nafsh, to perfect, to complete the number of garments for his nefesh. Or the taknam, and to correct the nefesh, that first of all you should have all the garments, and none of the garments should be compromised, none of the garments should be blemished or lacking. So now he brings another idea, and that is that you have to do every mitzvah. And this is why you come into Gilgul. Lavad mitzvah is b'melech, except for those mitzvahs which are dependent upon a king. And it's interesting that he mentions melech, and does not mention King Gadol. Shehu Meitzi Kol Yisrael, that a king, since he's the Neshama Klala, since he's an Asihu Akel, he does the mitzvahs on everybody's behalf. Because he represents everybody, and of course you understand and I understand. There's simply not enough time in history for each one of us to get a chance to be a king. So the king does the 6 or 7 mitzvahs that are specific to HaMelech. He's Yaitza everybody else. Okay? And besides for that, we have to do all mitzvahs. Now of course that means that you come back as once as a Kohen, and once as a Levi, and once as a Yisrael. Of course the question becomes, do you also have to come back as a woman? Which is an interesting question. But you have to come back in multiple gegulim to do all the mitzvahs. And the reason is to give a garment to kol tayag b'chinas keches shebenafshi. You have an neshama and a nefesh which has tayag min keches v'chayis, chachma, bina, and so forth, and they need garments, levushim, for expression and for revelation, and the garments of the mitzvahs. So you come back again and again and again till you do all the mitzvahs, and you have a levush each one of the koiches. Achas meheina leina dara chuli. Not one of them should be lacking. So now we have another question. Just like we spoke before, why is halacha so important? Now we're learning mitzvahs ma'asis are important. And why are mitzvahs important? Now understand there's another kvetch you have to keep in mind. It's not just the pshat you have to do mitzvahs. It's the pshat you have to do all the mitzvahs. Right? Everybody knows what the Gemara says, kol ha'esek b'mitzvah, patam and a mitzvah. What's saying here is kol ha'esek b'mitzvah, chayev b'mitzvah. It's not enough to say, well, I'm terasei, I'm nasei, so that's it, I don't do mitzvahs. You need to do the mitzvahs. And you'll come in a second gilgul and the third gilgul till you do each and every one of the mitzvahs. Machshava di b'ramais, now says, what's the big deal if I have just one mitzvah and don't have the rest? Ubi et inyan, and to explain the idea of hechirech v'tzerech, the necessity and the need, levushim elo, of these garments. Why do you have to have all the mitzvahs? Says the Alter Rebbe, mavu, Arbe Zeir is explained in the Zeir. Or move on the Chalmaskal, it's understood to all intuitive, intelligent people why it's important to have all the mitzvahs. And he explains. Ki liyes, because shenefesh ruach neshama sheba'adam, the soul of a person, even the godly soul of a person, heim bechinas nevraim, they're limited. And because they're limited, v'ef shelishum nivra, it's impossible for any creation. Lahasik, to reach, shom hasaga, any degree of reach, intellectually or otherwise. And the creator and former of all, who is Ein Sof Baruch. We are not at all kalim for Ein Sof. Even if the Eibishter were to shine his light, and emanate, it should come through the chain reaction of worlds. Top of Kuf from Samad Aleph now. Madrei Geis Rabbe, step, many steps. Madrei Gacha Madrei, step after step. In contracting the light intensely. And multiple garments that are most intense, which are limiting and contracting and concealing the light more and more. Which are only the people study Kabbalah. And the kind of tzimtzumim we're discussing are not ordinary tzimtzumim, but the tzimtzumim of a shin hamahus, because they're called be'ider rabba b'shem shaides, hair, and everybody understands the relationship between hair and the brain. The brain has seichel. When a person speaks with his mouth, he reveals the seichel which is in his brain. Of course, what the person reveals is a lot less than the brain has a possibility to understand. But when the hair grows from the skull, and the hair is also a gili from the mayach, no one's going to say, oh, look at those intellectual group growths. It's hair. Because since it has to be bekeah, has to burst through the galgelas, the skull, so it comes b'shin hamahus. So the tzimtzumim of Ein Sof are not just many tzimtzumim, they're tzimtzumim in a oifen of shini hamahus. Okay, because the ksiv, as the pasuk says, b'Daniel, arei shekamanaka v'gemer, that the hair on his head is like white wool and so forth. And if you've ever studied Chassidus, you know that there's two ways of understanding shaytus. One way of understanding shaytus is that because the light is so great, the only way to get it is for it to be reduced. And a deep way to understand shaytus is that you're taka getting the deeper light, the essence. But the only way the essence light is through the levush of shaytus, which is how the Yegimel Midas HaRachman are explained. Yegimel Midas HaRachman are called mazlis, shaytus, but it's not a tzimtzum, but the whole atzmos is concentrated into a shaytus. Says the Alter Rebbe, Afa Pikeh, if the Eibush would make all of these tzimtzumim, nevertheless, la yochla ha-nefesh ha-ruach ha-neshama, will be impossible for a nefesh, nor for a ruach and a neshama, le-mizbal el-kitev, to tolerate the light which is good, u'masok ha'eir, and the light is sweet, v'chulu, and so forth. Alter Rebbe says, the Ein Sof of the Eibush we're not kalim for, right? Let's put it into the correct form. We all know that neshama is a chelik al-kami mal mamash. Everybody knows that. Nevertheless, it says, Yisro miskashroim be'eraisa v'eraisa b'kodesh b'richum. The connection between the Yid and the Eibush is through Yiddishkeit and through Torah. Why do I have to have Teda? To connect to the Eibishter, I'm already godliness. And what's the Teretz? Maybe my Makav Shedish is godly. But my Makav Shedish is hidden from me. This is Tanya Perek Dalet, chapter 4. My Makav Shedish is hidden from me. As I am right now down here, I'm separated from the Eibishter. And the only way for me to have a relationship with the Eibishter is to reconnect to the Eibishter, and I reconnect to the Eibishter through his Teda and his mitzvahs. In other words, my neshama may be holy in its source, but as the neshama is down here, it's a nivra, it's limited. And for me to become holy down here, I need to have the Teda. So the Alter Rebbe says the problem is having the Teda is not enough. Because you want to get Ein Sof, you want to get the infinity of the Eibishter. It's impossible to get the infinity of the Eibishter, even if the Eibishter makes numerous tzimtzumim. Why? Because you're finite, and the Eibishter's infinity is infinite. Okay? And he says, the infinity of the Eibishter's light is called sweet. As the Pasuk says, Lach Azeis b'nei Yamavaya. To look at and to see the pleasantness, the sweetness of the Eibishter. Loshen ne'emus va'arevus u'masikas. Pleasantness and sweetness and sweetness. V'tainu gatzam le'nketz. And the experience of Ein Sof would be an infinite pleasure. As the Pasuk says, Oz tisanek ala Hashem. When Mashiach comes, we're going to have pleasure ala v'ay from the Eibishter. So one of the mishalim that's used to describe Ein Sof is Einik. There's an arichas dike sugya. Why? Ein Sof, the mashal of experiencing Ein Sof is tainug. It's not for now. It has to do with the idea of the Hisala Batzmusay. But the Alter Rebbe says the Eibishter wants, that we should experience Ein Sof. We should experience tainug alaki. And if I may say bluntly, even though the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it explicitly in this against the Kaddish, we mean befedish agili of save of Kalaman. The infinite light of the Eibishter, not the reduced light of the Eibishter, not Mamalak Kalaman. Mamalak Kalaman you can have through Kavanas HaMitzvahs, through Yechudim. This again is the Kaddish is saying a Jew wants to have Ein Sof. He wants to have Seif of Kalaman. Alter Rebbe says a drop of Seif of Kalaman is still Seif of Kalaman. You cannot possibly make yourself a vessel of a Seif of Kalaman because you're finite and Seif of Kalaman is infinite. And I want to repeat again. The godliness of Malak Kalaman you can have in Kavanas HaMitzvahs. The godliness of Seif of Kalaman, because it's truly infinite, is impossible to get. And he says this pleasantness and this sweetness of Ein Sof, as the Pasuk says, also sound like Alavaya. And it says in a different pasuk, "V'hisbiya b'tzachtzachos v'goyim." The Eibishter will satisfy. B'tzachtzachos. Tzachtzachos means something which is very, very, very clear. And the Alter Rebbe translates lashon tzachei v'tzamei. The word tzachei means thirsty. It satisfies the thirst of a person. Meshikosta b'zeh doesn't nezeh. Says the Alter Rebbe, this Ein Sof Seiv of Kalam, which is called Tainug Alaki. Ve'im b'keicha, no neshama has the possibility lekabel ha'areva hanimas v'areva, the pleasantness and sweetness hatzachtzachos of this thirst for Ein Sof, shalei teitze minarteka, that it should not affect, that the neshama should leave its sheath. In other words, the neshama should not leave the guf, but this battle mimtiyusa and be nullified from its form. Kener ba'avuka, like a candle is lost in a torch. We cannot experience Seif Kalam. We cannot experience Tainug of Ein Sof. And the Eibishter wants us to experience Tainug of Ein Sof. And if we would experience Tainug of Ein Sof, we would go crazy. We would lose it. We would expire. Right? Says the Alter Rebbe Imlay, but there's an eitzah. It's a very interesting eitzah. I want you to keep in mind the key. We're talking here about finding an eitzah for us being able to receive Seif of Kalaman, not Mamalak Kalaman. To receive a Malak Kalaman, even Ein Sof, that's called Yechudim. It's Atzilus. We're not talking here about getting the Yechudim, the Ein Sof, which is in the Eitzah Hashem Avaya through the different Yechudim. We're talking about getting Seif of Kalaman, and there's no kli. Says the Eibishter, says the Alter Rebbe, the Eibishter wants to give it to us. And if he wants to give it us, he has to give us a way of getting it. A, we should have it. B, it shouldn't destroy us. So Alter Rebbe came up with a very, very, very ingenious solution. What's the solution? The solution is he makes a lavush, a garment, for the Ein Sof Seiv of Kalaman from the Ein Sof Seiv of Kalaman itself. Imlay, unless the Eibishter should take some of this Ein Sof Seiv of Kalaman itself. That tishtal shel v'timshach imenu, it should come down through a chain reaction and a bringing down from there. Eizu ha'ara mu'et is a small ray, b'derech ishtalshlos, through the form of a chain reaction of worlds. Madrega acha madrega, step after step. B'tzim tzumim rabim, and multiple contractions. Ache yivra mimenu levush echad, so that it should create a single garment, that is taka nivra, which is a creation. That on the one hand, it's me'ein mahus, it's still from the same essence of erzeh, of this light, lahalbish, to be a garment, for a nefesh ruach and neshama, for the neshama. Hashem creates a garment from Ein Sof to tolerate Ein Sof. V'derech levush down. On the other hand, through this garment, shumein erzeh, since it comes from the madrega of this light, we'll be able to receive the light and it will not be able to destroy us. Tuchal lehon leis miziv erzeh, the neshama should be able to benefit from the rays of this light, ulasigi, and to reach it and to touch it. V'leitis battle, maybe to use it, not to lose its form completely. And the Rebbe gives a mashal, kamashal arei b'shemesh. If you're looking at the sun, you're going to go blind. But if you look at the sun, derech hashashes zakum ida v'chuli, through a glass, you're able to see the sun. As the pasuk says, "V'yav meisha b'teicha on," it went into the cloud. V'yav again, and he ascended. So it's explained in Zayar, and slabish ba'on, and he put on the garment of the cloud. V'Allah v'ra derech ona v'chuli, he saw through the cloud, and through the garment of the cloud, he was able to see it himself. And of course, in the mashal that he brings from Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to assume that the onan was from the same madrega of Ed that Moshe Rabbeinu wished to see. So Alter Rebbe finds a garment. Now, normally you have to understand how garments work. Normally, garments work like Yevorim, like a limb. A limb is limited. The amount of chayes you can put into a limb is correspondingly limited. And when the chayes goes into the limb is revealed in the limb. Right? And as the limb grows and expands, as you eat more food and you have a bigger body or you do more exercise, the limb becomes healthier. As the limb expands, the modern fancy word is, when there's a harchova of the kli, more eid is nimshach. We're not talking about that kind of a garment. We're talking about a garment where the correct term should not be evidim de malka, but lavush, a garment. Garments are not limbs. Garments don't grow. Garments are daimim. Evidim are lebedik. The neshama goes into the guf and they match, they come together. As the guf grows, there's more neshama. We're talking about a garment. Why a garment, not a lavush? Because we're not talking about the oil which is mizgale. We're not talking about a limited light which makes accommodations for you. We are talking about Sevav Kalam, which is not making accommodations for you. It's the truth of Ein Sof. And the Eibishter wants us to get the truth of Ein Sof, so he gives us a garment. This garment is going to allow us to hold the truth of the Ein Sof without us being destroyed, but it's not going to be changed to be suited and accommodating for us. To the contrary, through this lavush, we're going to have the Sevav Kalaman as the Sevav Kalaman is. Verstehst? And this is the idea of mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are the levushim for Ein Sof, have Sevav Kalaman. So, what you have to appreciate is, the Alter Rebbe is not saying it should be begilui. Begilui, Sevav Kalaman will be lost in love. But that the Sevav Kalaman should be yours. You should have a shaykhs of Sevav Kalaman. You also need a levush. And the only levush for the Sevav Kalaman to reach you is Sevav Kalaman itself. And that's what mitzvahs are. I'm sorry? It's revealing it to you. You're not experiencing it, but it's revealed. My nafkaminit, such thing as mitzvah gereres mitzvah, and a mitzvah protects. There's a lot of giluyim that come from mitzvahs which are not so conscious. Okay?